All right, everybody, welcome back to the On Hit podcast. This is episode 7. I'm Matthew. I'm here with Robert. And we've got a couple things to talk about today. Mostly, we're going to go over some deck lists for the new brutes that came out because uh, we don't mess with Guardian like that. And we're going to talk a little bit about the BNR announcement and how our Super Slam event went and a handful of other things. So, Robert, before I get into that, how has your week been, buddy?
My week's been pretty good. Didn't get to play any Fab this week. Got some other stuff going on. But 2 weeks ago, actually, we did a Ultimate Pit Fight Armory event for the Super Slam pre-release, and that was a ton of fun. That was my first Ultimate Pit Fight event. I built Tough Nut, which was really more of a comfort thing than the cards presented. I pulled some good stuff for probably Pleiades, but I had been looking at Tough Nut. Um, the odd thing is that there are no weapons in that set, so playing a pre-release event with just the heads-up cards in your was it 30 was pretty cool. I had a really good time, and being a six-man UPF was pretty crazy. We were right across from each other, um, so we got to share in that time with each other for pretty much the whole thing. And actually, we were first and second. So, yeah, what did you think of that event?
Um, we most certainly politicked our way into being in that first and second spot. um, it was a lot of fun. It was not my first time playing UPF. It was certainly my first time playing that large of a UPF game. And Robert, I know you know, but we actually had the way that it was set up. This was not planned by any means, but it was like reviled, revered, reviled, revered, reviled, revered. Like everybody was sitting next to their opposition during that whole thing. We also had a really fun thing that we were doing that it makes me want to do some more Super Slam, UPF or Shield or just anything with these characters where every time somebody would be booed, our entire table would go boo, and every time someone would be cheered, our whole table would go yeah. It further cemented how much I love this set. I stand by. I've said it probably for the last like 2 weeks straight, but I think this is my favorite set in Flesh and Blood, man. I had a ton of fun with that UPF. I also built a brute just to be comfortable. I played KO, which is very fitting because I know when we are going to preview these deck lists here in a little bit that we you are also on Tough Nut and I'm still on KO. So
Absolutely.
it was a good time. It was a really good
Yeah.
time. Yep. Sadly, we did not get to play any Flesh and Blood this week. I know we had planned on playing some Living Legend and terrorizing our group with our knowledge. Um, and speaking of Living Legend, we actually had I think it was like an emergency BNR, banned and restricted announcement, and it strictly was just for Living Legend.
Yeah, this one hits close to home too. I mean, the one of the main cards, only three cards got touched really, but one of the cards I felt the full flavor of. So when we went to Chicago and played in the ProQuest Plus, I played a Viserai list, and foolishly, I did not think to myself that this is really the only format where people can play CYB, and it was present. My last two games, I actually got fatigued to two CYB decks. Um, it sucked. It sucked big time. Getting my opponent down to, 2 life and then having them bounce back up to 20 something life just felt insurmountable. And to be fair, I didn't tech properly. But regardless, seeing CYB restricted in LL, it's probably going to hurt those players a little bit, might offend them a little bit, but it I think they really made the right call with this. CYB just being kind of like a skill check because those decks didn't make it into the top eight. I don't know where they ended up placing, but none of them were in the top eight. So, like, if they automatically fail to chain with his invert existences and the other super high power LL decks, but they can kind of weed out anybody playing off meta, I think it's probably the right call to move those, which is crazy because usually I am wholly opposed to bans and restrictions, especially in LL. So maybe I'm just a little bitter from my losses, but seeing those go, I think, makes the format healthier for players that want to try it out for the first time or want to modify one of their existing CC decks and take it to an LL tournament and still be a little comfortable. They also unrestricted Warmongers. So CYB got restricted to one copy. Warmongers got unrestricted. So
Which let's real quickly. I'd like to interject. Let's talk a little bit about the difference between like a full ban and a restriction, just in case anybody doesn't know.
Sure.
So LSS has kind of stuck with this rule that they will ban arena cards, so anything that starts in the arena, equipment, weapons, anything like that, and they will only restrict and bring you down to where you can play only one copy of anything that goes in your deck. Count Your Blessings, CYB being a card that builds off of the number of them that you have played. This is effectively a ban for it. I mean, cutting it down to one card means that at best it's a 2 for 3 life gain. Um,
Absolutely.
so
Whereas
it,
like,
it,
well,
it cuts it out.
a card like Warmongers though, being only a three of, there's no rainbow printing of it. Being restricted, it still has quite a bit of power. Kind of the same thing with like Succumb to Temptation. Um, Going from three to one, you still feel a ton of power when you have just one of them because it's such a good effect. Whereas CYB, like you said, it's effectively banned. Nobody's going to run one CYB. There's just no point. And that kind of goes to the other card that is an equipment that was banned. Do you want to talk about Zephyr Needle a little bit?
Yeah, so I had the either pleasure, misfortune, whatever you want to use in that slot of playing against that Zephyr Needle, up sticks and run Ira list. Um, I even as a lifetime Ninja player, I've played Ninjas for the very start of my career. Um, I was happy to see this card go. Zephyr Needle is a very good card. Um, when it was legal and classic constructed, it was really used a lot of the time into other aggro matchups that did not want to block, and you kind of punished them for that. Where it really, where it was okay for a while, was because it has a line of text that says if it's defended by a card with defense greater than its power, at the end of the combat chain, it breaks. So it used to be kind of a deterrent. Excuse me. It used to be a little bit of a deterrent for you to kind of just swing it willy nilly. With the printing of Upsticks and Run, a card that you can pay one and retrieve a dagger from your graveyard and re-equip it, it means that there is almost zero interaction with this card. Anytime that you go to block something, they can just use flick knives and they can just throw one of them at you before the combat chain closes, so it's still active and on the chain and available target to be thrown at you with flick knives. Um, it created just this freight train. And again, with Upsticks and Run being 9 of, because it comes in a rainbow copy, it's hyper consistent. And again, it's just a way for them to just slam damage into you. Um, I'm with you on the fact that I don't necessarily love bans, and again, especially in Living Legend. Um, However, I am much happier to see just this card go versus them pulling up sticks and run or restricting up sticks and run. I like the idea of the archetype. But if Ninja just completely gets pigeonholed into doing this, and again, there is very little bit of interactability, right? That's kind of one of the things they mentioned in their article is like, yes, you should be able to do powerful things, but you should be able to do powerful things under the fear of interaction and disruption. And there really wasn't any good interaction here. So, um, Warmongers getting unrestricted is very interesting as well. You know, Running the one of is fine. It seems like LSS is kind of on the they're kind of on the ass of Runeblade right now. They seem to kind of I wouldn't go so far as to say they have it out for Runeblade, but they're certainly trying to keep them in check. Um, so when we played that event, we played against a handful of Runeblades, or I played against at least one. We had tested multiple times against Chain, trying to prepare for that as well, and it it will feel good. I don't think I ever saw Warmongers. I put them in, they never popped up. That format is so fast that I think the consistency being added back with Warmongers, again, only going up to 3 copies, not 9 of them. I think is okay as well. And then the last thing I'll say too, before I just talk for 20 minutes uninterrupted, CYB, I'm so glad that we are moving on from this card. You and I shared the same feeling at the very beginning of Rosetta that this card probably should just not have existed in the first place, let alone have existed in a 9 of. I think there would have been a better design space to make something like this, like that burst life gain that did not feel so backbreaking. And I know at that event, I personally did not have fun watching you play that match. You did not look like you were having fun playing that match. The people playing CYB did not look like they enjoyed playing that match. And certainly the 4 or 5 judges that all collected around you guys at the end, because you guys played for a solid 20 minutes past when everybody else was playing, nobody looked like they were enjoying that match. That is a card that I fully believe probably just should never have existed in Flesh and Blood, and unfortunately, there are copies of it floating around. So,
I still think that it would have been more okay if it would have just been an Earth card. And maybe you would have seen it just become toxic in other decks, like maybe Starvo. But if it was, even if it was like a Verdance, an Earth Wizard card or something, I don't think it would have been nearly as problematic. But giving access to other decks that are already going to fatigue you to just gain life inconsequentially. And again, like I said, if I would have ran Reaping Blade, it would have been something else. But being my first structured tournament, I was really worried about like my sideboard and stuff, and it just kind of got overlooked. I was also super hyped to use Rosetta Thorn and Viserai for the first time, so I didn't even really think about it. So part of the impetus is on me to not, don't get me wrong, the card has answers, and they were printing answers based on some of the expansion slot cards that came out soon after. But obviously it was too little too late because they got CYB out of Classic Constructed before they gave us those expansion slot cards. So it's kind of a moot point. One thing I do want to touch on real quick too is I noticed in their article it talks about how the viable ninja decks have quickly gathered around Up6 and Run / Zephyr Needle. So the fact that Ira and Zen were both running 9 copies and Zephyr Needle, I wonder if that will have reverberations through other cards that kind of seem like must includes for other classes. Like I could definitely see Viserai starting to climb into the Belittle Minnowism kind of field, and I wonder if they see like every Viserai deck runs this, and every Chain deck wants to run this, and any other deck that can run this wants to run this. Are they going to start trying to touch on those? Is it a power thing? Is it a homogeneity of deck lists type of thing? Like I know Magic was real big about that. They hated cards that were quote unquote auto includes for your color. So I'm curious to see what direction we go in from here. But
yeah, I'm not sure. Belittle Minnowism is a great it's a great point to bring up, because that deck does permeate strictly through Living Legend. What I'll say about that is I think that something that speeds up games in a generic sense is probably a little more likely to stick around than something that slows them down. I don't know if you played a ton of Kaladesh and remember Paradox Engine and remember the reverberations into Commander that Paradox Engine created, where in competitive Commander, it wasn't the biggest deal because enough people were running really low cost interaction, or if it was coming down, it's coming down as a combo piece and people are usually winning on the spot. But really where you saw it start to create these really boring, long-winded games was when just like your random Krenko player would throw it in, and they would take now a 10-minute turn just tapping and untapping and tapping and untapping, really for no true like board state presence or like really like a forward momentum of the game. Maybe they would push them forward a little bit, but it just every single person would slap it down, and it would make CDH games even take an extra 10, 20, 30 minutes that they didn't have to take. And like I said, God forbid casual games taking an extra hour. You and I both have played enough casual Commander to know that sometimes you get locked at a table for like 3 hours, and by that time you're ready to eat somebody's fucking cardboard.
for sure, I'm ready to scoop and just go home.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe that's more a consequence of my feelings on deck building, where when I look at building a chain list, it's hard to fathom putting a list together that doesn't include some version of a Belittle Minnowism suite. And I don't like feeling that way. I don't like feeling like if I want to build the best version of this list, I have to include some combination of these 2 flavors of cards, essentially. And maybe that's just the nature of the beast. I don't know yet. But to be determined, And honestly, that's a good segue into your list, because you're doing something kind of parallel within CC that they've added in the last couple of sets. Do you want to start talking about your Kano list?
Yeah, so
or KO?
I do. Well, same thing. You know what I mean? I play them both. I have to at least preface by saying that the inspiration for this deck has come from a handful of sources. I did not come up with the NIMBY Nimblism package on my own. I was even actually kind of lost on where to start with this hero. I've played Brute for such a long time, and they all play so differently. I mean, at this point, I think I have. Um, Once I build this, and if I get around to building Tough Knot, I will just have like a CC legal deck for every Brute hero that's existed.
Yep.
Um, Obviously, it's a class that I enjoy a lot, but so KO's ability. So this KO also starts the game with one weapon zone, and then as an instant, you pay 4, you tap him. Target attack action card you control has base power 6. Whenever the crowd boos you, create a vigor token. So what I really tried to do, and what the goal of this NIMBY Nimblism deck is, if you want to highlight NIMBY, it says when this attacks, you may search your deck for a Nimblism, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. It costs 0, so this can effectively be, if you make the Vigor token and you have it on the turn, from the turn previous, you have it for this turn, you have the floating resource, or you have a Tunic Pitch, you can essentially just one card 6. And it's the idea of taking that power, and there are actually quite a handful of low-costed attacks in this deck. It's very different than what Brute normally likes to do. Brute normally likes to play 6 power cards. KO being the underhanded cheat, the cheater, pumpkin eater, he says, well, what are you talking about? All my cards are 6 power. I don't know what you mean. So for right now, I'm going to stay on 6 copies of NIMBY. I'm going to stay on 6 copies of Nimblism, just in case I'd like to play any of the reds or block with any of the blues. And then the 3 Jack B Nimbles. This is just a payoff for having played out any of the Nimblisms. It's also a 0 cost. It says when this attacks, you may banish a Nimblism from your graveyard. If you do, this gets +1 and go again. And then the extra little text of when this hits a hero, steal an item they control until the end of this action phase. That's probably almost never going to come up. There are very few item-heavy decks in our format right now, not necessarily in our in like the overarching meta, but at least in our local meta. I mean, gold you might steal from somebody, which is going to be cool, and that's fun. Gold is actually really cool to make in this deck, or to just have. Not a thing that I'm really going to build around, but just the way that it works. It costs 2 to destroy it and draw a card. So the idea of being able to pitch a blue into it, this is a very blue-heavy deck, so the likelihood that we'll rip into another blue means that we essentially get to use that to fuel KO's ability if we have not made a Vigor or don't have a Tunic Pitch. Some very noteworthy cards. The equipment suite is what it is. Right now, the only weapon that he really can use is Mandible Claw to any sort of effect. This deck doesn't really discard any 6 power cards other than the one Outside Interference. I still don't know what I'm going to be grabbing with this as of right now. After a little bit of testing, I'll probably have a good idea of maybe a handful of toolboxy cards that I can put in the inventory that I can grab and try to slide in whatever I need to. But yeah, I really like this deck. This deck just tries to make might tokens, it tries to make vigor tokens and be booed, and then it just tries to throw very sneaky attacks where it plays very similar to like a warrior play style of, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Are you gonna overcommit and overblock this, and I'm just gonna save my blue for later, because all these blues are really good. They're all very useful. They're either good attacks that I can play out, or they are good non-attacks that will, get me to be booed or will buff some of the things that I'm doing. And then, like I said, or if they choose, whatever, this is a 0 for 1, I don't care. You windmill it into a 6. You hopefully just pitching one other card, keep that same kind of Brute 2 for 6 style, and really mess with them. So there's one little package that I want to speak about, and this will probably be the wrap up to this deck. Again, very little testing that I've done with this other than a handful of Talishar testing, handful of Felt Table testing. So I'm running 2 Fix the Match. I think this is something that we talked about in our preview as like a little cool little fun interaction, but this is something that I'm very excited to try out. So Fix the Match is a 0 cost, 3 attack. It says when this attacks, search your deck for a card, then shuffle and put that card on top. Whenever a card defends this, clash with the defending hero, the winner creates a might token. Well, Matthew, you might be asking over there in your chair, Robert, you don't have a whole lot of very high-powered cards. What would you possibly be grabbing and putting on top of here?
I bet I know.
Well, that's where we won a singular copy of Overturn the Results.
Yep.
Um, you throw this on top, and you either win the clash and make your might tokens, or more than likely, you lose the clash, and because you are failing to win the clash, you will in fact win the clash, and the crowd will boo you. Um, so you will make your vigor tokens and your might tokens, and you will make them for every time that a card would defend that. So if they're defending with multiple cards, they think that you're going to pump it up. Maybe there's a bunch of might tokens, or you put a villainous pose onto it, something to kind of buff it already. They may defend with a couple cards. It even counts defense reactions. If somebody waits for you to activate that KO ability, and they're going to wait to kind of throw out a Sink Below, it will still see that Sink Below as having defended this card, and it will clash for you. So I think that that's a fun little package. I don't know how good it's going to be. I also don't know if I'm going to throw maybe a second Overturn the Results in my inventory as one of those outside interference targets. Maybe I have to block with it early. It is a 3 block. Maybe it gets pulled out of my hand, whatever it might be. So that's probably the one thing that I'm really kind of thinking of right now for outside interference. And honestly, just the names of all these cards are really kind of going together, right? Fix the Match goes and gets Overturn the Results. And then you can have an outside interference, which also goes and grabs your Overturn the Results. You're kind of pulling back in. This does seem like a really fun deck. I had a lot of fun testing it on just Felt Table, like against the KO AI deck, and beat it pretty handily. So I'm interested to play this. It plays, like I said, so different from any of the other brutes, but it will. This is at least a good starting point, I think.
Yeah, I remember reading in the Rules Reprise that when 2 Overturn the Results are revealed at the same time, I think they have some tricky interactions where the first player reveals Overturn the Results, and then the second player reveals it. And I think there's some weird breakdown on you have to sequence it properly, otherwise you'll screw yourself. Because, obviously, what happens if both players fail to win, then the first player technically wins, but then the next player fails to win, and it's some weird dichotomy about that. I don't think you'll have to encounter that a whole lot, but I think that's a rule we should look up and learn just for, our game state knowledge purposes. That's definitely a cool
the way that I
interaction.
understand it, I think that it is so let's say you and I both flip Overturn the Results. I'm the active player. I get to choose the order in which they go. So I'll say that
Yes.
yours triggers first.
Yes.
So yours will say, okay, I did fail to win the clash, so I actually win the clash. And then
Right.
mine will see, okay, well, not only did you fail to win the clash, but you for sure did not win the clash. So then
Right.
it will also trigger. So
Yes. Yes.
I think that
Exactly.
most often they will both trigger. But I think uh, I'm not sure when ordering it will matter. Um, but I think once we get into that game state, I think we will have a little bit better idea of what we want to do there.
For
So,
sure. I guess the other question too would be, do you both get booed then at that point?
yes.
It's pretty cool. I'd be booing twice. That was absolutely one
Oh
of my
yeah.
favorite parts of the UPF game was booing and cheering with the whole table, and I think a great way to get other players to be like, "What the hell are those guys doing over there?" You know. But well, sweet dude.
Oh, that was some of the most fun that I've had in a long time, man.
Yeah.
Just like the booing and cheering and just sitting around the table. I haven't belly laughed that hard playing a game of Flesh and Blood in a long time. So,
Excellent. Well, I'm gonna move on over to my Tough Nut deck.
hmm
All right, this is Tough Nut, Bumbling Hulkster. 3 intellect, 40 life. So that sucks. But his ability is instant speed, tap him, pitch the top card of your deck. If it has 6 or more power, the crowd cheers you. And whenever the crowd cheers you, create a toughness token. Um, this deck is focused around a single piece of equipment, a weapon actually, called Rock. And you'll see in the way the deck's constructed, it's really just play some pump stuff and dump your hand out and then swing the rock for a bunch of damage. This is an extremely yellow list, so I've got 15 reds, 15 blues, and 30 yellows. Um, Being a KO heavy hitters KO player, I've really been spoiled with my amount of blue, quote unquote, six powers. So this kind of has to take a step back and focus on some of my yellow sixes. So what you'll see in this is some pumps that are one cost to get some extra resources off a pitch, and then tap him to pitch the top card of your deck, hopefully hitting enough to get at least three, and then swing the rock. I will say the Gauntlets of Tyrannical Rex, again, I haven't played this a ton either. I've done a few Talishar games, a few Felt Table games. These gloves, I feel like, get a ton of value if you sequence your stuff right in this deck. I'm talking 3 pump and 3 life over the course of a game, so definitely everything you'd want in a legendary equipment. And I don't know if the other brutes can really utilize these as well, with his restriction of having a 6 power card in your pitch zone. There are times where, because you have things like Numbskull Charm, which the third mode lets you also pitch the top card, and maybe I need to say that too. When you pitch with Tough Nut, you get the pitch value of the card. You're not just putting it into the pitch zone, you're actually gaining resources off of it. So between Tough Nut, between Numbskull Charm, and between something like Tit for Tat, which lets you untap your hero basically, I had some test games where I ended up having like 6 or 7 resources. I couldn't even really use it all. That's also kind of why Scabbies are in here. Scabskin really is just for 3 life for the most part, but if you find yourself with a Buck Wild in your hand or something that doesn't have Go Again, 2 attacks of some sort, you can go surprisingly wide out of nowhere. Some of the main key components for this deck are like Heroic Pose. This is to get like if I can pitch a yellow 6 into my pitch zone, I have 1 floating. Pretty much anything I hit off the top, except for a couple of the reds, are going to give me enough resources to swing the rock. And also, all of the pumps in this say your next attack, so they pump my weapon as well. Surprisingly, also, the toughness tokens are pretty good. They make it so I can have 2 cards in my hand and block with 1 card for maybe 5 or 6, and then use some equipment to cover some pretty big stuff, and then still have a really impactful turn, even being at 3 intellect. Another great card that got added in from this last set is Song of Sinew. This is just a phenomenal card. Being able to look at the top cards of your deck and put them back where you want really makes pitching with Tough Nut just feel so good. I really like the concept of this deck. I don't know that this will be its quote-unquote strongest iteration. I mean, there's some good pump stuff. There's some really cool effects. Another card that really surprised me with how often it was good. Let me see here. I mean, there's a lot of good cards in this. Jaws of Victory. Jaws of Victory is super good. You can also kind of game your early play style around this, where you eat a little bit more damage so that you're getting cheered, but you don't have to be cheered by this to get the Go Again. So having a 2 for something Go Again when you have a bunch of resources, and you've got Tunic Pitch coming online every once in a while, this is just kind of a tricky stuff, comes kind of out of nowhere, and a lot of times you'll find yourself just like making a bunch of tokens and then swinging the rock for like 12 unpreventable. So I'm a big fan of this thing so far. There's a couple cards you've inspired in this as well, like Visit the Boneyard. You get a Vigor token, get to take something from your graveyard with 6 and put it on top so you know what you're going to hit. I mean, you can really hedge your bets against the quote-unquote randomness of this. And Talisman of Recompense. Actually, these 3 right here, Visit the Boneyard, Tit for Tat, and Talisman, are all cards that you kind of turned me on to for this. I don't know what happens if you have 2 Talismans out yet. I'm going to try to figure that out through some play testing. It'd be crazy if you gained 6, but I don't know. Because it's a replacement effect, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But yeah, this is just kind of a fun, doing tricky stuff, using a weapon that came out a long time ago and finally got some support. Unfortunately, this is Tough Nut's signature weapon, even though it didn't come out with him. So should Tough Nut really take off, we will also lose the rock, which I don't love. But, what can you do? Um, yeah, I mean, it takes advantage of mostly new cards. It does have blue Wrecker ROMs in here, of course, and my other blue 6 power that I got from this set, Wind Up the Crowd. I like that it's kind of a callback to the Wind Up cards, and it is very, very good. The Vigor tokens in Brute seem just super powerful. Um, all in all, I have to say too, this is definitely one of my favorite sets. I was really big on Rosetta, but not because of any of the heroes, more so because of the support cards they gave my dude Viserai. So this is the first set where I've been really excited for one of the heroes in the set in quite a while.
Yeah, I really like this list, man. I'm with you. It's a little sad to see Rock get tied to a hero, um, but only because I remember Rock coming out and I remember people just being like, "What is this fucking trash, dude? What is
Yeah,
this thing?" That's when Skullcrack came out, and they had a handful of other ways to like try and make it work, but it was more of a meme than anything. And now it getting like a dedicated hero and a dedicated build. I mean, this is cool. Talisman of Recompense, I believe, only because I want it to work this way, because I don't want you to get 6 resources from it, but I think that the replacement would see that you're gaining 3 from the first one,
that's what
and it
I'm
will kind
thinking.
of turn off the other one. Yeah.
Well, what I would be
Um,
worried about is, if both of those effects go on the stack at the same time, and then the first one comes off, and it sees you gain 3 on the second one, would that card just stick, or would it pop it? And maybe Talishar will have those answers for me. I don't know, but like I said, I aim to find out here in the near future to see if it's gonna really blow up, because that might change some things too. This deck does
yeah.
have moments where it's very much like a feast or famine, where you're either just not quite there, or you've got so many resources and no cards in your hand that it makes it kind of tough.
Yeah, I love Song of Senu in here. I think that's great. Um, I think the gauntlets are so nice. I think maybe Heavy Hitters KO can take care of this or can also use this.
The gauntlets.
Not immediately, yes. Not immediately on that first attack. Obviously, because you have to have something in your pitch zone first before you activate it. You can't
Hmm.
activate this and pitch. Same with the rock. The rock cares very much about you having no cards in hands before you activate it, so you can't just pitch a blue to do it. That's kind of why Tough Nut is built the way that he is.
For sure,
Um,
sequencing is critical in this deck. I mean, if you don't play the cards out in the right order, you just won't be able to use your weapon. You have to empty
yeah,
your hand every time. So there are a lot of times where you're inefficiently pitching, or you're, doing things like discarding a wind up, or you're playing cards that you can't really get a ton of value out of. But there are some really surprisingly good cards, like Crowd Goes Wild being cheered. I mean, a Numbskull Charm plus a Crowd Goes Wild with Scab Skins, and then, you know, there are a lot of ways to make a lot of damage come out of nowhere. It hasn't, again, been tested against anything but AI, essentially, so to be determined. But I'm hoping that it will shake out. There's a lot of naysayers saying, "Oh, this thing's gonna fall to like go wide aggro." Kiss my ass, dude. You think I don't know how to block a ninja? Come on, dude. I'll take some damage, and then I'll have less life. I'll get cheered, and then I'll come back and I'll fucking thump them. So I'm holding up hope that I can make this thing happen. Um, there's not a ton of defensive cards
for
in
sure.
this, but there are some. There are some defensive cards. So also, one last shout out:
Well,
Heroic Grit. Your next attack this turn gets +1 for each toughness token you control. Make a toughness token on a common dude. They're lucky they didn't give me a red and a blue. I'll just say that.
yeah,
It feels so good in this list where it's like I've got 3 toughness, and all of a sudden that's a bunch of power on my rock right now. So, and my next attack or my next action that blocks next turn gets pumped up to high heaven, so I can cover up an important mask trigger or a detrimental effect or whatever it may be. I do think Tough Nut will really stumble if he gets tapped down, but with things like tit for tat, there are always ways around it. So
the one thing that I like about Tough Nut is that his own hero ability causes him to be cheered. Um,
yes,
so kind
yes,
of as you were saying, like, you mentioned on, Crowd Goes Wild, or you also mentioned it on Jaws of Victory.
yep,
Um, you know, being able to tap him, pitch a, let's say you pitch a blue, You can use one of it into Gauntlets of Tyrannical Rex, and then use the other two floating into this. You probably have been cheered if you pitch, Wreck a Romp or Wind Up the Crowd.
Hmm.
And same thing, now you just have a 2 for 7, or essentially a 3 for 7 go again into whatever else you're going to do, which is very cool.
For sure. I
Very,
mean,
very cool.
one of the best plays is pitching a blue into Jaws of Victory, and then you can tap him at instant speed, especially if you're manipulating your top deck to pitch a yellow off the top that's a 6 power. So you get cheered, the card gains go again before damage completely resolves, and then you can use the 1 floating plus the 2 off the yellow to send the rock. So you end up getting 13 points off of a 3 card hand with some trickery. It's sweet, dude.
It's very cool. Off
That's
of technically a
actually
2 card
off
hand,
a
right?
two
Because you
card.
can
That's
block with the other
true.
card.
Yeah, yeah, with your toughness
Yeah.
tokens. So it does weird things in weird ways, and it's a lot of fun. I suspect it's only a couple good ass whippings away from me being like, what the hell am I doing here? But until that happens, I'm still excited. One final thing before we move on from this multitudinous set of cards that we have here. No Hero Stands Alone. This is actually really freaking good. It's a 3 for 6 yellow with 0 block, revered action. While this is in any zone, if you've controlled a toughness token this turn, this gets +3 and ambush. And then when this defends clash with the attacking hero, the winner may choose an attacking or defending card to get -3/-3 this chain link. Um, this is freaking crazy, dude. Um, Being able to pull power off of cards while also playing this um, out of your that zone right under your hero. Um, Arsenal, out of your arsenal, it says it right there on the card. Um, this goes off a lot and becomes a 3 block and can be pumped by other things and just is a good effect. I mean, if you win the clash, which in Tough Nut there's so many ways to stack the top deck, like this in Arsenal, Song of Sinew on your turn, play your attacks out, whatever, and then pass and block with this. If you win that clash off the top, you're getting 6 points of defense off this card essentially. So super good, and that's in combination with any toughness tokens you might have. So maybe not, again, into super go wide if there's a bunch of on hits and stuff. Yeah, they're gonna get some, but against a guardian, against anybody sending something real big and nasty at you, or against a warrior who might be pumping up their sword or something, this guy does surprisingly well defensively with so few cards in hand. I've been pleasantly surprised so far. So
Yeah. Um, yeah, like I said, man, this deck looks great. I would like to give a huge shout out. We'd like to shout them out here and there, but I'd like to give a huge shout out to Meg Games out in Colorado, and to
absolutely.
Kyle, one of the owners. Um, we probably would not be able to interact with the set nearly as much, were we not getting, um, I don't want to say sponsored in an official capacity,
It feels like it
but
sometimes.
sometimes, man, they're really sweet. They love the channel. Kyle and I have been friends for, over a decade at this point. And so he'll send us out, a case of Flesh and Blood. And we sat right here in my new living room in our new house and ripped open a case, together with my wife. And, we're absolutely going to get to jam on these heroes a lot earlier, and a lot cheaper than we would have originally done though. So, um,
Absolutely, they make a lot of
please, if
things
you're in
possible.
the yeah, if you're in the Greenwood Village area, please check them out. Please go check out their armories. Again, Kyle is one of the nicest dudes on the planet. Is always happy to help out anybody who's there. So, um, yeah, man. Without him, we probably would not be, uh, like I said, jamming on these brutes that we love so much. So,
Do they sell product online?
they do have a TCG player, store, I believe.
Okay,
I
maybe we
don't know
can
that
look
they
into
sell
like
Flesh and Blood singles. I think they're more Magic and Pokemon. But
sure. I mean, still, maybe we can put a link in our description or something so people can go find them if they want.
yeah, absolutely. I'm sure we could do that. Um, So yeah, man. I think that these decks look really fun. I'm very excited to play KO. I hear that you sound very excited to play Tough Knot. Um, you know, it's certainly going to be a lot of banging our heads against the wall for the first month or so, as is per usual with any of these decks. But man, I am I'm just pumped to play cool new brutes, man. It's
For sure.
still my favorite set in the, or my favorite class in the game. So
Well, and it's cool that they've managed to develop some brutes that can kind of pull us away from the power source that is heavy hitters KO, because he is just a bad mother, dude. As far as brutes go,
yeah,
he seems to check all the boxes, but these are so different and so unique that it's like they don't feel like they're in competition with him because they're doing something so different. So that's definitely what's hyping me up about him.
yeah, yeah. I'm very excited. I never thought that I'd be running zero cost, three power cards in a brute deck, but here
For
we are.
sure. Yep.
So I think that about wraps it up for me, buddy. I don't know if you have any closing thoughts.
No, I think that's about it, man. I like your KO deck quite a bit too. I had some lamentations about like, without having a bunch of low cost, low power like on hits, I didn't really see how it would be worthwhile. But I think you're climbing up the right trees with exactly what you're doing. So I'm excited to see what that turns into, and I'm excited to see what this turns into. But yeah, that's pretty
Yeah.
much it for me, man.
All right. Well, I'll wrap this up by saying, we've recently seen quite a bit of a decline in our viewership. Um, so we'll kind of come back on here and again and say, if there's something that people want to watch, if there's some kind of content that people want to see, we really want you guys to interact with us in some meaningful capacity. Um, just so we know, we're doing this for the love of the game. We're doing this because we enjoy it. Um, but we still want to make content that people also enjoy, and we still want to make things that people want to engage with. So don't be afraid to reach out to us. Don't be afraid to share these things. I don't necessarily want to do the whole gross influencer thing of like, like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. But please, that helps us, gives us a sense of, lets us know that we're moving in the right direction. So,
For sure. And if you see cards in these lists that you think are fucking stupid, then say it. Let us know so we can get better. But I think they're perfect as they
yeah.
are, so I'm not really too worried about it, honestly. But
All right, buddy. Well, I look forward to jamming these decks into each other this weekend, probably a little bit next week, and we'll see how it goes.
yep, for sure. All right, buddy. We'll see you.
All right, we'll see you guys.